Okay, this is going to be tricky because originally this chapter was filled with some kind of frustration, some ranting, some things about artificial intelligence that I wanted to discuss perhaps, but watching this, or I guess listening this again, just it's just a mess. And so I basically need to talk about something for 20 minutes, or I just need to cut out this chapter altogether, or just make it shorter. But it's still the same kind of idea behind the whole project. We are using here, or I guess we're looking at me using some of the tools that are available to us. This is Marvelous Designer, and the procedure here is quite standard. I'm just doing the regular thing, the thing that I would normally do, be it work for video games, or be it work for film, or even for fashion industry. This is all kind of standard stuff. But I suppose what sets it apart just a little bit, and this is going to be visible in the uncut, unedited videos, is the automated tools that even Marvelous Designer has. So it's it's a trend, right? It's not a trend, but it's the situation that we, or I suppose myself at the time of recording, found myself in. It's the idea that things are going to be automated, right? And even the applications that seem to be working on some automation, in this case it's simulation of fabrics, working with like physical properties, real life physical properties, to do the simulation, to create the assets. The application itself has a section that supposed to work automatically, in a sense that it does function almost like a Lego, where every piece of clothing, almost not all, but almost every bit of clothing can be replaced, right, by custom garments. So think about switching sleeves, think about switching the base of, be it a jacket, be it a shirt, a t-shirt, a pants, whatever, right? They can be replaced, they can be modified, they can be changed, all of those things. So it's already in the application. The problem is, though, that at the time, and this is well, I suppose this is just my knowledge, I haven't seen anybody use those tools. I haven't seen anybody utilize this this section inside of Marvelous Designer in the industry. I'm not even sure if people are aware of that, were aware of that tool. I myself found out about it when I made a tutorial dedicated just to Marvelous Designer. I was surprised that such a thing even existed inside of the application, and even though it was clunky, it was still limited. Nonetheless, it was surprising and very interesting, and definitely I could see the potential. But as far as I know, at the time of this recording, it's not being used. I'm not even sure if it's inside the application altogether, because it's been a while since I opened it up. And so I guess the thing that I wanted to talk about here is the subject of convenience. I'm going to tell you a little story. So when I just started, not just working, but when I started doing 3D many years ago, 20 years ago or something like that, there was a point where I almost gave up doing this thing, right? It was a hobby for sure. I was still in school, so obviously I couldn't do anything professionally with it, but it still was a passion. From the very beginning, from the moment I created a 3D cube inside of 3ds Max, I just fell in love, not with the application, but with the possibility of having a 3D object in front of your eyes, controlled by your hand through the mouse. There was something crazy about the whole thing. Now, if I think about it, or if I say something like this, it might sound silly, but at the time it was not revolutionary because the 3D effects were already there, but definitely revolutionary in my life. I've never experienced anything like that. So I was definitely passionate about this this hobby of mine, but like I said, I almost gave up at one point. And the interesting thing about it, though, is that I gave up at the point where when I tried to create a character, because previously, prior to that moment, I was making vehicles, I was making planes, following the documentation you would find inside of 3ds Max, or gathering some resources online. So doing those kind of things, right, step-by-step tutorials, and at the same time was modeling things that I would see lying on my table, so pencils, elastics, books, anything like that, right? So it was like I said, it was a passion, but it was passion about creation. I wasn't interested in texturing, I wasn't interested in colors. I was purely interested in the shapes, right, in the kind of 3D aspect of the whole creation. And so when I decided to do a character, because there was a tutorial that was the most kind of thorough making of tutorial that was available at the time, and the quality was really good. It was in the text format, so it wasn't video. You would just look at the images, some of the images, right, and you would follow the guidelines. I think it was called Creating Jeanne of Arc, something like that. It was a kind of stylized character wearing armor, very cutesy looking, by all standards today, very simple model. And I remember as I was making the model, I think it began with creation of the head. And that wasn't a problem for me, even though I remember making heads as like when you would use 3D modeling. Remember, it wasn't ZBrush, right? You would just literally polymodel everything at that time. I remember heads giving me the biggest problem, but for that tutorial, the problem came when I was making the foot. I simply, even though there were images, I simply could not understand what I needed to do, because I understood that the shape of the foot, right? I understood it in terms of I could visualize it, but because it wasn't symmetrical, unlike the face, it meant that I needed to manipulate the points, the polygons in space in such a way that for some reason, for whatever reason, my mind just couldn't grasp, right? And I was struggling with this. I remember being stuck and so frustrated with this foot that at some point I just basically said, I'm not gonna do this ever. I'm not gonna do this ever again, right? Not the foot, not the character, but just 3D in general, because I was looking forward to kind of upgrading, or I guess stepping up my own game, instead of just following the tutorials on the mechanical things, the cars and all of those assets. I wanted to make something organic, and I thought that this would be a really something very interesting, because I was at the time also going to an art school, quote-unquote art school, and I remember that clay was my favorite part. And I remember that it wasn't about building the castles, even though that was one of the exercises that we did there. It was when we were making something organic that I really enjoyed the most. So I thought that in 3D I would have just as much fun and just entertainment, really, if I was making characters, right? But because I got stuck, and I got stuck so badly, in frustration, I just said, I'm not going to do this anything. And I didn't do anything for a while. For several months, I didn't open the 3D. I didn't open 3ds Max. until one time a friend of mine who was actually the person who showed me 3ds Max, and he was also modeling things, and he was modeling cars. He was big into cars, especially BMWs, and he was modeling them all the time, rendering them using Brazil engine. That's something that if you're familiar with Blur Studio in Hollywood, that's the render that they used a lot when they also were beginning their company. Right, we're talking about like early 2000s. Yeah, he showed me something, and I remember opening that video, and it was like 20 minutes long, and I remember the name. Well, I kind of remember it in my head because it's almost like I remember the symbols, but I don't remember the actual name. It's if I find it, I put it in the notes on the video. But the inside of the video, I saw at first just some round, well, just some red spheres, right? There wasn't any name of the application. I just saw the canvas, saw some tools, a very strange looking thing, very strange looking environment in terms of the application. And on the screen I saw red spheres appearing, and they were starting to shape or morph, I guess, into some kind of a silhouette of a human-like creature. And then there were just some stages where I couldn't understand what was going on, but all of a sudden the spheres, they turned into like almost like a lump of polygonal clay, and there was no, I don't think there was like mouse cursor on the screen. I think it was just almost like the pointer was missing. And I could see, I remember I was just looking at this, and I could see shapes becoming, turning into forms. And all of a sudden, step by step, the creature that was just some spheres turned into a monster that was anatomically just stunning, right? I could see all the muscles, I could see the biceps, I could see so much. And then on top of that, there was detailing taking. There was the on top of the surface of the creature, details started to appear, and not just some details that I would normally used to see. Maybe some bumps, maybe some cuts. I would see some very intricate details, like small details, something that we would normally see on displacement maps or maybe on textures, and I would see that in 3D. On this, whatever it was, right, this kind of polygonal shape thing. And then on top of that, there was material and color assigned to the creature, and even some lighting. And I remember when it was all finished, I watched it again, but I just couldn't understand what the hell I just experienced, right? What is it that I'm looking at? And so I've asked this friend of mine, and he said, well, this is an application, it's called ZBrush, and you can do basically sculpting in there. And I immediately went and got my hands on ZBrush, and that's just the rest is history. I fell in love with that, even though the version that I was using, the kind of the earliest version of ZBrush, they are nowhere near as they're nothing like the version that we see today. And to be fair, and this all connects to the I guess the why the program was created in the first place and what it was in the first place. The environment, the UI that you see today in ZBrush, it's just so unintuitive, it's just so crazy. Like, honestly, if I was to start using ZBrush today, I wouldn't even know where to begin, because things are just called so strangely. You have a model, but it's somehow called tool, right? There are so many things that just don't make any sense. But if you know the background behind the application, you will understand why they're called a certain way. You will also understand why the program is called ZBrush, right? It was supposed to be like an addition to painting almost. You would have 3D elements that you can put on the canvas, and unlike Photoshop, unlike 2D applications, you would be able to manipulate those objects in space, right? But in the end, you would still have like a painting composition inside of ZBrush, and there would be very basic tools for lighting, basic tools for coloring, right? That's kind of like ZBrush, right? Z as a XYZ dimension, and brush because it's still related to painting, right? So that's kind of the origin of the program. But anyway, the reason why I'm telling you the story is that it kept repeating in my life, in professional, I guess, life, again and again and again, this kind of frustration that I felt. The frustration with Joan of Arc wasn't so much my lack of skill, even though it was definitely there. It's just that intuitively I couldn't grasp the idea, the whole thing about it. Just something was really off. Something about the whole process was just putting me off, right? My mind just didn't work that way. Just intuitively I knew that something could be done, right? And ZBrush basically did exactly that. Instead of manipulating the individual points, instead of just extruding edges, you would have a whole bunch of polygons, and you would have a brush, right, like a point of manipulation that can move all of those points at the same time. And that's the whole kind of mechanical process behind ZBrush, right? It's still polygons, you just manipulate a lot of them at the same time. That's just what it is, really, right? So you can do that still in 3ds Max. You can create those kind of models in 3ds Max, for example, or Maya. It just will take you forever to do that, right? And so the next time that I had experienced something like that was when I was trying out texturing. And my first textures I did maybe 7 or 8 years after picking up 3D modeling, because as I mentioned, I was so in love with the with that side of the process, right? Just the forms, the modeling, the creation, the just pure creation of it, that texturing wasn't even something that I thought about, right? And I didn't even think that I would have a career in this field altogether. So it was still a hobby, basically. But I remember when I did my first textures, it was the same kind of process as with Joan of Arc. The process was such that you would take a low poly. First you create the high poly. The ZBrush was already there, so it was kind of easier, right, compared to just 3D modeling. Then you would create a low poly version of that, and then you would unwrap the model, the low poly model, so you can start doing the textures. And unwrapping, the UV unwrapping is well, for if somebody watching and they don't know what UV unwrapping is that if you imagine a model being made out of paper, UV unwrapping is that almost like you cut the surface in such a way that you can unfold this paper on a table, on some flat surface, right? And it will kind of have the shape of the 3D model, but just lying in 2D on the table. So that's UV unwrapping. And so imagine at the time where you would already have the possibility to see your models in 3D. I mean, it was 3D modeling, right? You would have everything in 3D, but texturing was done in 2D. You would have this unwrapped 2D surface that you would bring into Photoshop, and you would paint that. And I remember just my mind going kind of frustrated as again, it's like, why am I painting something that is unwrapped, something that is just flat lying, whereas the end result should be in 3D, whereas I can already rotate and manipulate my model. Why is it that for some reason I have to and obviously there were reasons behind it, right? Technological reasons behind it. Why was the process of texturing is so different? And so law came Mari. There were some plugins for 3ds Max. I remember that. There was another standalone application. I remember that as well. But the program that changed everything, at least for me, and I think for industry as well, it was Mari. And the application was used in in Avatar. It was, I think, as far as I can remember, it was created by Weta Digital from New Zealand, the VFX studio, and they made the application Mari just so they can texture everything for film Avatar, right? James Cameron's movie Avatar, and so they released it for the public, and that was the time where you were able to properly texture your models in 3D environments, right? Instead of having the textures lying in 2D unwrapped, you would paint literally in 3D on your model. So that was an instance where things were changing, right? And my mind was already kind of noticing that, not because I have some kind of foresight, right? I just sense that this is not working, that this is supposed to be different, right? It's like just doesn't make any sense. Why is it so detached, right? And the next thing was, we can talk more and more. There were examples, basically what I'm trying to say, there were examples of those kind of cases, of those kind of situations where I felt the frustration. And so what I'm, I guess with this video class, what I'm seeing myself, right, and what I guess I was trying to show as well, even though there's definitely value, the tools that I'm using, they're still useful and they're used everywhere in the studios, right? It's the same frustration that I feel here that I felt when I was introduced to ZBrush, the same frustration that I felt when I was introduced to Mari, that something needs to change, right? Something will definitely change. I don't really know what it is, but every tool that I use here in this class, it's either just outdated, right? So like modeling tools, or it's just not working properly. So the actor core, the VR sculpting, the meta-human thing, so they have the potential, but it's not even that they have the potential. It's almost like they're hinting at something else, right? It's almost like small hints that something is going to happen, right? Something is going to replace them because they're just not convenient enough. And I think this is the whole kind of point behind behind this talk. It's about convenience, really. It's not like nobody can do in 3ds Max what we can do now in ZBrush. That's not the point. I mean, people can definitely do that. It just will take, like I said, it will take just much longer. It's going to be a much more difficult job. But it's not like ZBrush made 3D Max obsolete. It's not like electrical instruments made chisel obsolete, right? It's not like people before electrical instrument couldn't make stunning, beautiful sculptures out of marble, right? So the same goes for 3D. It's not like people cannot do in 3ds Max or Maya or Blender things that we can do in ZBrush. We can. It's just the matter of the things is the convenience, really. It's about the convenience. And if you look at this class through the amount of things that I'm using here, the amount of techniques that I'm showing, it's kind of crazy, really. I mean, the amount of things that I came up with just to create the character, the amount of tools that I found just to be able to create this is just staggering, right? And it's not about that we cannot do, it's not about that we just cannot use those tools and to just basically be okay with that. Neither is the case where without these tools I wouldn't be able to create this character. I would, right? I was making those kind of characters before those tools appeared. But it's about the convenience, and so far, right now, at this moment in 2024, the convenience is simply not there. I feel just frustration. I feel the tools are being so outdated. They're so clunky. There's just something so off about them, even though they work. Like for example, texturing in Photoshop on 2D unwrapped surface also worked, right? Just like 3D modeling also worked, but it wasn't convenient for certain things. And today there's the things are moving in a direction where those tools don't seem to be convenient anymore, right? And so something will have to change. Something will definitely change, and it's kind of interesting to notice this process, right? To be in this process. And it's quite interesting to get back to this class, to get back to those videos, and just just look at how much I had to try, and just feel this frustration to kind of get 100% sure, or just be 100% sure that all of this is going to be replaced somehow, sometime, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be quite soon.